Omega healed Alpha King's poisoned blood until his pulse echoed a song only she could hear. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Sarah Weston had always been an outcast in her village. She was an Omega, the weakest in the werewolf hierarchy, and her lack of a wolf scent made her even more of an anomaly. Most Omegas had the faint, unmistakable scent that called to alphas, but Sarah had none. She was just there, invisible. It was a cruel fate for someone who had always dreamed of more. One evening, while walking through the dense woods near her village, Sarah stumbled upon something that would change her life forever. A figure lay in a clearing, his body battered and bruised, the ground around him stained with blood. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized who he was. The man before her wasn't just any stranger. He was the Alpha King. He lay unconscious, his skin pale and clammy, his breathing shallow. He had been poisoned, and his blood seemed to pulse with a dark, unnatural energy. Without thinking, Sarah rushed to his side, her instincts kicking in. Despite her lack of experience in healing, she had a natural affinity for herbs and remedies. She had learned from the village healer, but never thought she'd have to use her knowledge on someone like this. Her hands trembled as she pressed her fingers to his wrist, feeling the weak, erratic pulse beneath her touch. She knew the poison was spreading through his veins, threatening to claim his life. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and focused, calling upon the teachings of the old healer. She had to act fast. She gathered what herbs she could find nearby, creating a makeshift poultice to slow the poison spread. As she worked, her mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he here, in the middle of the woods, wounded and on the brink of death? But her thoughts were interrupted when the pulse beneath her fingers seemed to steady, the erratic beats slowing to a more regular rhythm. It was then that she felt something else, something she couldn't explain. A strange connection, like an invisible thread pulling her closer to him. She felt his heartbeat in sync with hers, a slow, steady thrum that echoed in her chest. And as his breath began to deepen, Sarah realized something extraordinary had happened. The Alpha King was alive, and she had saved him. But there was more to this than just a simple act of kindness. The moment his pulse steadied, something shifted. His eyes fluttered open, revealing the depths of a man who had seen the weight of many lifetimes. His gaze locked with hers, and for a moment, it was as if time itself had stopped. His voice, hoarse and broken, whispered, "You saved me." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know who he was yet, but she could feel the intensity of his words reverberating through her very soul. As she gazed into his eyes, the connection between them deepened, pulling her closer to him in a way she couldn't resist. And that's when the truth hit her. This wasn't just some random stranger she had helped. This was the Alpha King, and somehow, their fates had become intertwined in a way neither of them could have predicted. Sarah blinked as the Alpha King's eyes slowly focused on her. His gaze was intense, the silver-gray eyes piercing through the dim light of the forest clearing. For a brief moment, she felt as though she was being pulled into a deep abyss, where nothing existed but the sound of his steady breath and the rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo in her chest. She couldn't look away. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. He had to be the Alpha King. His presence, his aura, the weight of his gaze, all spoke of power far beyond what any ordinary man could wield. But why was he out here, alone, and what had happened to him? The Alpha King's lips parted, and his voice, raspy and strained, broke the silence. "I am Lucas Nightshade, Alpha King of the Northern Territories," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone of his apparent strength. "And you, Omega, you saved me." Sarah froze. The words felt like a shock, a jolt that shot through her body. She hadn't expected him to reveal himself so quickly, let alone acknowledge her actions with such reverence. "You saved me," he repeated, his gaze softening. His chest rose and fell with each labored breath, but he looked at her as though he had just witnessed a miracle. She opened her mouth to speak, but found herself at a loss for words. There were so many questions swirling in her mind, but she didn't know where to begin. "You're the Alpha King," she stammered, barely able to process the weight of her own words. "Why were you?" Lucas closed his eyes briefly, a pained expression crossing his face. "I was poisoned," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My blood has been tainted, cursed. It's the reason I've been hiding, pretending to be a mere shadow of what I once was." Sarah's heart ached at the vulnerability in his words. She had never imagined that the mighty Alpha King, the ruler of the Northern Territories, would be brought so low. She had heard the stories of his strength, his invincibility. But the man before her was not the powerful Alpha King she had imagined. He was weak, broken, and vulnerable. And somehow, in that moment, she felt a deep pull toward him, a connection she couldn't explain. "How did you know?" Sarah began. But Lucas interrupted her, his eyes opening to meet hers. "I didn't know," he said softly. "Not until you touched me, not until you healed me." He paused, his expression shifting as he looked at her with a strange intensity. "I felt it. The moment your hands touched my skin, I felt the bond between us. The song of fate." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had felt it too, that inexplicable connection, like their souls had been entwined in that brief moment of contact. But she hadn't understood it, hadn't known what to make of it. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Lucas's gaze softened, his features filled with a quiet understanding. "It means you and I are meant to be together," he said, his voice low and firm. "You are my mate, Sarah, the one the moon goddess has chosen for me." The words hung in the air, heavy and profound. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. Mate. The word felt foreign, impossible, and yet it stirred something deep within her. She wasn't sure what to feel. She had never considered the idea of a mate, let alone being bound to the Alpha King. But the more she looked into his eyes, the more she felt an undeniable pull toward him, as though her very soul recognized him as her own. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice shaking. Lucas reached out, gently taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding her, calming the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said softly. "But I promise you, Sarah, you are not alone. I will protect you, cherish you, and help you understand the bond that connects us." Sarah nodded slowly, her heart still racing, but now with a sense of something more than fear, something she couldn't quite define. All she knew was that this moment had changed everything. She had healed the Alpha King, and in doing so, she had unknowingly bound herself to him, to a destiny that was now beyond her control. But as the forest around them grew quiet, and the stars above twinkled like diamonds in the night sky, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. Whatever the future held, she knew she would face it with him by her side. Sarah stood at the edge of the forest, her mind racing with the implications of what had just transpired. The Alpha King, Lucas Nightshade, had declared her his mate, and though the words still seemed impossible to comprehend, something deep inside her knew it was true. She had healed him. She had saved his life. And in doing so, their fates had intertwined in a way she could never have imagined. But what did that mean for her? She had always lived as an outcast, an omega with no place in the world. Now, she was bound to the most powerful man in the kingdom. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to face him. Lucas was standing a few steps behind her, his presence overwhelming, his every movement graceful despite his earlier weakness. His silver-gray eyes were fixed on her, watching her every move as though he could sense the turmoil in her mind. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and steady, "I know this is all overwhelming, but I promise you, you are not alone in this." She could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it didn't ease the confusion swirling inside her. "I don't know how to be what you say I am," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've never been anyone's mate. I don't even know what that means." Lucas took a step closer to her, his gaze softening with understanding. "I understand," he said, his voice gentle. "This is all new to you, but you are not alone. I will be here, by your side, every step of the way. Together, we will figure this out." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but doubt still lingered. Could she really step into this new life? A life as the mate of an Alpha King, a life that would no doubt come with its own set of challenges, responsibilities, and dangers? She had always been content with her quiet existence, helping where she could, living in the shadows. But now, that life seemed so far out of reach. "What if I can't live up to what you need?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Lucas's expression hardened, not with anger, but with a fierce determination. "You don't have to be strong, Sarah. You already are. The bond we share, it's not about strength. It's about trust, loyalty, and love. And I will help you find your place in this world, just as you helped me find mine." His words were like a balm to her soul, soothing the uncertainty that had taken root in her heart. She took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. Maybe she didn't have to understand everything right away. Maybe, for now, all she had to do was trust him. "I will try," she said softly, looking up at him. "I will try to understand this bond, and I will try to be what you need me to be." Lucas reached out, gently cupping her face in his hand. "That's all I ask," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "You are my mate, Sarah, and together, we will face whatever comes." As he spoke, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had him now, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small but filled with hope. Lucas smiled, his eyes softening as he looked down at her. "Now," he said, his voice steady and sure, "we take the first step toward our future. Together." The forest around them seemed to hold its breath as the night air cooled, and Sarah knew, in that moment, that her life had changed forever. She was no longer just Sarah Weston, the invisible Omega. She was his mate, and the journey ahead would be one of discovery, of challenges, and of a love stronger than anything she had ever known. As the days passed, Sarah found herself growing more comfortable in her new life, though doubt still lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Lucas, the Alpha King, had kept his promise to stay by her side, guiding her through the complexities of the bond they now shared. He was patient with her, explaining things slowly, helping her understand the depth of their connection. He showed her the world he ruled over, a kingdom filled with strength and power, but also with its own set of struggles and challenges. Despite the grandeur of the castle and the people who revered him, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas was hiding something. There were moments, fleeting but unmistakable, when his expression would harden, and his eyes would darken with thoughts of something unknown. He never spoke of it directly, but she could see the weight of it on his shoulders. One evening, as they sat together in the castle gardens, the night air cool against their skin, Sarah decided to ask. "Lucas," she began softly, "is there something you're not telling me? Something that's bothering you?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes soft and thoughtful. He hesitated for a moment, as though weighing his words. Finally, he sighed, a deep, weary sound. "There are things, Sarah," he said, his voice tinged with a quiet sadness, "that I have kept hidden, even from those closest to me. My curse, the poison in my blood, it's only part of it." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There is a darkness that follows me," Lucas continued, his gaze far away as though he could see something beyond the garden walls. "A legacy I cannot escape. The curse that poisons my blood, it is tied to my past, to the bloodline of the Nightshade family. It was not just an accident. It was a trap, set by those who wished to see me fall." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching at the raw emotion in his voice. She had always known that being with an Alpha King would come with burdens, but this was a burden of a much darker nature. "Is there a way to break it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the swirl of emotions in her chest. Lucas looked at her then, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "I don't know," he admitted. "I have spent years searching for a way to undo the curse, but each time I think I've found the answer, it slips further away. I have tried everything. Healers, magic, even the oldest rituals known to our kind. But nothing has worked." He looked down at their intertwined hands, his grip tightening slightly. "The curse is a part of me now, Sarah, and I fear that no matter what I do, it will never truly leave me." There was a long silence between them, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Sarah didn't know what to say. She had never faced anything like this before. But in that moment, she realized something. Despite the darkness that surrounded him, Lucas had opened up to her, something he hadn't done with anyone else. He trusted her, and that trust meant more than anything. "We'll figure this out," Sarah said finally, her voice full of conviction. "I don't know how, but I'll be here with you. We'll face this together." Lucas's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "You don't know what that means to me," he said quietly. "You have no idea how much I need you, Sarah. I don't deserve you, but I will fight for you. I will fight for us." As the night stretched on, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. Despite the uncertainty of their future, despite the challenges that lay ahead, she knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together. And that was enough for now. The stars above twinkled brightly in the night sky, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always hope. And for the first time in her life, Sarah believed it. She believed in the future they would build together. Days passed in a blur of new experiences and growing closeness. Sarah and Lucas settled into a routine, but the weight of his curse never seemed to fade. Though the nights were peaceful and the days filled with shared moments, there was always a quiet tension between them, a reminder that the darkness within Lucas was not yet gone. Sarah could sense it, that lingering shadow that hung over him like a storm on the horizon. Despite his reassurances, she knew there was more to his struggle than he was willing to admit. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, Sarah paused and turned to him. "Lucas," she began, her voice hesitant, "I know you're trying to protect me from your burden, but I can't help feeling like I'm still in the dark. I need to understand more about the curse." Lucas stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing slightly. He had always been guarded when it came to discussing his past, but the sincerity in Sarah's voice made him pause. "I don't want to burden you with it," he said quietly, "but I understand why you need to know. It's hard to explain." Sarah's heart ached at the sadness in his tone. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his. "Whatever it is, we face it together," she said, her voice unwavering. "I don't want to be kept in the dark anymore. Please, tell me." Lucas sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of years of secrets. "It all started with the Nightshade family bloodline," he began. "Our family has always been powerful, but with power comes great responsibility, and sometimes, dark things come with it. My ancestors made a pact with a powerful sorcerer, one who promised them unmatched strength and control over the northern territories. But that power came with a price, a curse that was passed down through the generations." Sarah listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. "The curse," Lucas continued, "it's not just about poison. It's a binding curse, one that twists the very nature of the alpha bloodline. It makes us stronger, but it also makes us unstable, dangerous. Over time, it destroys the very soul of the one it claims, turning them into something unrecognizable." Sarah's mind raced. She had never imagined such a dark history behind the man she had come to care for. "And what happened to you?" she asked softly. "How did you get caught up in it?" Lucas's eyes clouded with pain. "I was young, and I didn't understand the full extent of the curse. I thought I could control it, that I could be different. But as I grew older, the poison took hold. It started with small symptoms, pain, weakness, but it escalated. My blood became tainted, and I couldn't stop it. The curse feeds on my anger, my fear, my emotions. And once it starts, it's only a matter of time before it consumes everything." Sarah's heart ached for him. She could see the burden in his eyes, the pain that came with every word he spoke. "Is there any way to break it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas shook his head, his expression darkening. "I've searched for answers for years. I've tried everything. Magic, healers, ancient rituals, but nothing works. The curse is tied to the very essence of my bloodline. The only way to truly break it is," he trailed off, as if the words were too painful to say. Sarah took a step closer, her hand reaching for his. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Lucas hesitated before speaking, his voice barely a whisper. "The only way to break the curse is to destroy the bloodline entirely, to sever the connection between the Alpha Kings and the source of the curse. But that would mean," he paused, his gaze meeting hers. "It would mean destroying everything, my throne, my people, my family. It's not a choice I can make lightly. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine at the gravity of his words. So, you're saying you could never truly be free of this curse unless you give up everything? She asked, her voice trembling. Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes filled with sorrow. Yes, and it's a choice I can't make alone. It's a decision that affects everyone around me, and I won't put you in that position. Sarah's mind raced, her heart torn between the love she felt for him and the harsh reality of the curse that controlled his life. She had no answers, no solution to offer him. But one thing was certain, she would stand by his side, no matter what came next. You don't have to make that decision alone, she said firmly, squeezing his hand. We will figure it out together. There has to be another way. We just have to keep searching. Lucas's gaze softened, his eyes filled with gratitude. You're right, he said, his voice filled with a new sense of resolve. We'll find a way. Together. As they stood there, in the quiet garden, the weight of his curse still hung between them. But in that moment, Sarah knew one thing for sure. No matter what the future held, they would face it as a team, united against whatever darkness sought to tear them apart. As the days passed, Sarah and Lucas grew closer, their bond becoming stronger with every shared moment. The weight of the curse still loomed over them, but they faced it together, supporting each other as they sought answers. Sarah could feel the shift in Lucas, the growing resolve in him, as if the hope she gave him was slowly chipping away at the darkness that haunted him. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the castle's grand hall, Lucas turned to Sarah with a look of determination in his eyes. I've been thinking, he began, his voice steady but filled with an intensity Sarah hadn't heard before. There may be a way to end this curse without destroying everything I've built. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, hope igniting within her chest. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas leaned forward, his expression serious. There's a legend, a forgotten piece of our history. It speaks of an ancient artifact, one that can cleanse the bloodline of its curse. It's said to be hidden deep within the mountains of the Northern Territories, guarded by trials and dangers that no one has ever returned from. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. You think this artifact could break the curse? Lucas nodded. It's the only lead we have left. If this artifact truly exists, it may be the key to freeing me from this curse. The weight of his words settled over them both, and for a moment, the room fell silent. Sarah could see the uncertainty in Lucas's eyes, the fear that still clung to him despite his resolve. She reached out, placing her hand on his. We'll go, she said softly, her voice full of conviction. We'll find this artifact, and we'll break the curse together. I'm not afraid. Lucas's gaze softened, a mixture of gratitude and love filling his eyes. You're braver than I ever could be, he said quietly. But the journey will be dangerous. We don't know what we'll face, and I can't promise it will be easy. Sarah squeezed his hand. We don't have to know everything. We just have to trust that we can do it together. Lucas smiled, the warmth returning to his eyes for the first time in days. You're right, he said. Together, we can face anything. And with that, they made their decision. The next morning, they set off toward the Northern Territories, leaving the safety of the castle behind. As they traveled, Sarah could feel the weight of the journey ahead. She didn't know what dangers they would face, but she was ready to stand by Lucas's side, no matter what. The road was long and treacherous, winding through dense forests and steep mountains. The air grew colder as they ascended higher, the sky darkening with storm clouds. But through it all, they pressed on, their bond strengthening with every step. Sarah's heart raced with anticipation, but also with a quiet sense of peace. She had never felt more sure of anything in her life. They were in this together, and nothing would stop them. When they finally reached the mountain's base, the air was thick with the scent of ancient trees and the weight of history. Lucas paused, looking up at the towering peaks. This is it, he said, his voice low. The artifact is somewhere up there. But the trials won't be easy. We'll have to face our fears, our pasts, everything that has brought us here. Sarah looked up at the mountains, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the journey would be difficult, but she also knew that with Lucas by her side, they could face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would break the curse. Together, they would change their fate. And as they began the climb, Sarah couldn't help but feel that the bond between them was stronger than any curse stronger than anything that could try to tear them apart. The journey through the mountains was more challenging than Sarah had ever imagined. The air grew thinner with each step, the biting wind cutting through their clothes as they ascended the rugged terrain. Lucas, despite his strength, moved with careful precision, each step calculated. Sarah followed closely behind him, her breath coming in short bursts as they made their way upward. The path was treacherous, narrow in places and steep in others, but neither of them hesitated. They had come this far, and there was no turning back. As they climbed, Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the trials ahead. The artifact they sought was hidden somewhere in the heart of these mountains, guarded by ancient forces and untold dangers. But it wasn't just the trials that worried her. It was what they might find once they reached the artifact. Lucas had told her that the artifact could break the curse, but he hadn't mentioned the price that might come with it. Every step they took, Sarah's mind was filled with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. What if the artifact didn't work? What if the curse was more than they could handle? And what if, in the end, Lucas had to make a sacrifice that she couldn't bear to watch? The thoughts weighed heavily on her, but she pushed them aside. They had come this far, and she couldn't afford to let fear take hold. She had to stay focused, for Lucas, for herself, for the future they had yet to create. After hours of climbing, they reached a small plateau, a momentary reprieve from the harsh winds. Lucas stopped, his breathing labored, but steady. "We need to rest for a moment," he said, his voice hoarse. Sarah nodded, grateful for the break. They sat down on a large rock, the cold surface biting into their skin. Despite the exhaustion, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. Being here, with Lucas, in the midst of the mountains, felt like the beginning of something that could change everything. They had faced so many obstacles already, yet they had come this far. There was hope. After catching their breath, Lucas stood and gazed out over the mountain range. The moon was high in the sky, casting a silver light across the rugged peaks. "We're close," he said quietly, almost to himself. Sarah stood beside him, looking out at the vast expanse of wilderness. The mountains stretched as far as the eye could see, a majestic, untamed world of their own. "How do you know?" she asked. Lucas turned to her, his silver-gray eyes filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "I don't know," he said softly, "but I can feel it. The artifact is close, and we're running out of time. The curse, it's getting stronger, and I can feel the poison inside me growing." Sarah's heart clenched at his words. She could see the toll the curse had taken on him, the way his strength was fading bit by bit, like the life being drained from him. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We'll find it," she said, her voice firm. "We'll break the curse. Together." Lucas's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You're right," he said, his voice tinged with gratitude. Together. They stood there for a moment, the wind howling around them. But in that brief silence, it was as if the world had stopped. It was just the two of them, facing the unknown together. Sarah squeezed his hand, a silent promise passing between them. They would find the artifact, they would face whatever trials awaited them, and they would break the curse. And in the end, they would create their own destiny, no matter the cost. With renewed determination, they turned and continued their climb. The path grew steeper as they ventured deeper into the mountains, the terrain more unforgiving. But they didn't stop. Together, they would face whatever the mountains had in store for them. Together, they would break the curse and change their future. The trials awaited, but so did hope, and Sarah knew that as long as they had each other, nothing could break them. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper into the mountains, the terrain becoming more difficult with every step. The path was narrow, winding its way between jagged rocks and thick snow. Sarah's breath came in short bursts, the cold seeping into her bones, but she didn't mind. The only thing that mattered now was reaching the artifact. The weight of the curse still hung heavily over Lucas, and Sarah could feel it, like a shadow that followed them, waiting for the moment when it would consume him. But she couldn't let herself think about that. Not now. Not when they were so close. As they climbed higher, Lucas paused, his hand pressing against the rock face as he took a deep breath. "We're almost there," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "I can feel it. The artifact, it's close." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. They had been climbing for hours, their bodies exhausted, but they couldn't stop now. "Let's keep going," she urged, taking a step forward. Lucas turned to look at her, his eyes filled with determination. Together, he said, his voice firm. Always together. Sarah smiled softly, her hand reaching for his. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of peace. They were facing the unknown, but they were facing it together. They would find the artifact, and they would break the curse. As they reached the top of the mountain, they saw it. A massive stone archway, covered in ancient runes. The entrance to the hidden chamber. Lucas stepped forward, his hand brushing against the cold stone. "This is it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "The artifact is inside." Sarah felt a wave of anticipation wash over her. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew they were ready. They had come this far. They could face whatever was inside. Lucas glanced at her, his expression serious. "Be careful," he warned. "The trials are not easy. The artifact will not be given freely." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that tugged at her heart. They stepped through the archway, entering the chamber beyond. The air was thick with magic, the walls shimmering with an otherworldly glow. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, the artifact resting upon it, an ancient crystal, pulsing with a soft, blue light. But as they approached, the air grew colder, and a voice echoed through the chamber. "Who dares seek the artifact?" The voice was low and echoing, reverberating through the stone walls. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "We seek the artifact to break the curse," Lucas said, his voice firm, but his body tense. The voice laughed softly, a cruel, mocking sound. "The artifact cannot be wielded by the weak. It demands sacrifice. Are you willing to pay the price?" Sarah looked at Lucas, her heart heavy with the weight of the question. The price? What price would they have to pay? But Lucas didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the artifact. "We will pay whatever price is required," he said, his voice unwavering. "We've already lost too much. We won't lose each other." The voice fell silent, and for a moment, the chamber was still. Then, the crystal began to glow brighter, its light intensifying until it filled the entire room. Sarah's heart raced. This was it. The artifact was awakening, and with it, the power to break the curse. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something more was coming. Something they weren't prepared for. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and the chamber seemed to shift. The pedestal rose from the ground, and a barrier of light surrounded the artifact, shimmering with power. "To claim the artifact," the voice said again, "you must prove your worth. Only by facing your greatest fear can you unlock its power." Lucas stepped forward, his hand reaching for the barrier, but Sarah caught his arm. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "What do we have to face?" The voice was silent for a moment before it answered. "You will face the darkness within, the fears, the doubts, the burdens you carry. Only by conquering them can you claim the artifact's power." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She knew what that meant. She would have to face her own fears, her own insecurities, the doubts that had plagued her since she was a child. The fear that she wasn't strong enough to stand by Lucas's side. The fear that she wasn't worthy of him. But she couldn't let those fears control her. She had to overcome them. For Lucas. For them. As she looked at him, she saw the same determination in his eyes. He was ready. Together, they would face whatever trials awaited them. Together, they would conquer their fears and claim the artifact. And together, they would break the curse. No matter the cost. The chamber seemed to close in around them as Sarah and Lucas stood before the glowing barrier. The air crackled with energy, the force of the trial pressing in on them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the challenge ahead. She looked at Lucas, his eyes locked on the barrier, his face a mask of determination. But beneath it, she could see the faintest flicker of doubt, a reminder that the darkness within him still threatened to take hold. "We have to do this," Sarah said softly, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her stomach. "We can face this, together." Lucas nodded, his grip tightening on her hand. "Together," he repeated, his voice strong. They took a step forward, and the light surrounding the artifact flared brighter, creating a shimmering wall that seemed to stretch endlessly. It pulsed with an ancient power, the energy vibrating in the air around them. Sarah felt it in her bones, a deep, resonating hum that sent a shiver down her spine. "You will face your greatest fear." The voice boomed again, the words echoing through the chamber. Only by overcoming it will you claim the artifact and break the curse. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She knew what this meant. Her greatest fear, her deepest, most painful fear, was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. The fear that she was not enough. That no matter how hard she tried, she would always be weak, always be the outcast. She had spent her life fighting that fear, hiding from it, pretending it didn't exist. But now, standing here, in front of the artifact that could change everything, she realized she couldn't run from it anymore. She had to face it. "I'm ready," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. She felt Lucas's presence beside her, his hand still holding hers, and for a moment, she drew strength from him. Together, they could do anything. The barrier began to pulse again, the light intensifying. Sarah felt a wave of heat wash over her, and then everything went dark. The chamber disappeared, and she was alone. She gasped, her breath shallow, as she found herself standing in a field, one she recognized. It was the village she had grown up in. The familiar sights, the houses, the trees, everything was just as she remembered. But something was wrong. The air was heavy, the sky overcast, and the once thriving village was now quiet, empty. No sounds of children playing, no bustling markets. Just silence. She turned slowly, her heart racing as she felt a presence behind her. A voice whispered, just out of reach. "You will always be nothing. You will always be weak. No one will ever accept you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The voice, it was her own, echoing her deepest fears. She knew what this was. This was the part of her she had tried to bury. The self-doubt, the constant feeling of inadequacy. It had always followed her, no matter where she went. She was never good enough for her family, never good enough for anyone. "No," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I am enough. I have to be." The voice laughed, cruel and mocking. "You will never be enough. You were never meant to be. Look around you. You are alone." Sarah felt the weight of those words, a cold shiver running down her spine. But then she remembered Lucas. She wasn't alone. She had him. And together, they had come this far. She had the strength to face this fear. She took a deep breath and turned to face the darkness, standing tall. "I am not weak," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I am not nothing. I am more than the fear that tries to define me. I am enough." The darkness around her seemed to falter, shrinking back as if it could not withstand her words. Sarah's heart swelled with a newfound strength, a strength that came from within. She was no longer the scared, uncertain girl she had once been. She had found her place in this world, and no fear, no curse, could take that from her. The field began to fade, the village dissolving into light as the trial came to an end. Sarah's vision blurred, and she was back in the chamber, standing beside Lucas, who was watching her with wide eyes. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with awe. "You faced it. You overcame it." Sarah nodded, her heart still racing, but now with a sense of peace. "We did it," she corrected, squeezing his hand. Together. The artifact glowed brightly before them, its power now unlocked. The light filled the chamber, and the curse, the poison in Lucas's blood, began to fade. They had done it. Together, they had broken the curse, and their future was theirs to claim.